That's what we about, living by the sea.
I definitely beat myself up over this one.
Last night was
Under the shade of a tree.
not good.
I could have won an $11,000 pot.
Taking shots?
Everything's gonna be okay. I know it is.
What's up, guys? In a Sacramento hotel room. I stayed in a place called Rancho Marietta last night. I was driving towards Sacramento, looked up a hotel on Hotel Tonight, found this place for under $100. It was super nice. So glad that I stayed there. Really relaxing place. Hit the hot tub. Just regrouped a little bit, gathered my footage, flew the drone. By the way, I broke the drone, so I am not sure how. So after reviewing the footage, I do in fact know how I broke the gimbal on the drone. Rather than landing it in the street like any normal person would do, I decided to land it on the roof of my car. The roof of my car is not perfectly flat, and the drone slid off to the side, landed on the ground. I didn't actually know that this was the way I broke my gimbal until I reviewed the footage and remembered this happening. Still running bad because that's a $1,000 drone. I'm actually going to play a low game. $500 buy-in. We'll get in a session tonight at Stone's before moving on to somewhere else tomorrow. I'll figure it out tomorrow, but let's get the session in here at Stone's. For the hands that are not overly complicated, I'm going to breeze through those in the interest of time so we can get through a lot of hands here. All right, guys, we've been playing in this game for about 45 minutes now, and I bought him for $500. I'm already up around $300. I've been playing really aggressively, and this is the first hand that is played where the action is caught on camera. So we'll pick it up here. Already up $300 to $400 in the session. In this first hand, an action player who actually refers to himself as Action Dan limps in, and we are on the button. I've been isolating a lot of his limps, but in this spot with Jack 10 offsuit, I decided to overlimp here, and the small blind completes and the big blind completes. We go 4 ways to a flop. Flop comes 10-8-7 with 2 spades, and it checks to Action Dan. He puts out a large bet of $25, and we make the call, obviously, with top pair. The big blind also makes the call, so we end up going 3 ways to a turn. On the 8 of hearts turn, when it checks to me, I decide to go for value here because I think that the other players are going to have a lot of 9s in their range and some flush draws. So I decide to make a bet, and the player in the big blind folds, and Action Dan ends up making the call. The river is a 3 of hearts, and Action Dan checks it over to me again. When I think about going for value, I start counting out chips. He also counts out chips as if to say he's going to snap call me. So I think that this is definitely a sign of weakness and a sign that he doesn't want me to bet. So I end up going for the value bet here, and he thinks about it for a while and ends up making the call. So we end up getting 3 streets of value in a limped pot with the one hand worse than us, which is a pretty great result. In this next hand, I raise it up with the Queen 8 suited and get pocket 4s to call me. The flop comes out Jack Jack 6 with 2 spades. I have a flush draw and an overcard. I decide to continue here with a semi bluff. When the ace comes on the turn after we get called, I think that this is going to be a great card for us to continue bluffing on, continue semi bluffing as well. So he checks it over to us and we put in another bet and he makes the fold here. So great result, taking it down with Queen high here. This next hand, I raise it up to 15 with pocket 10s, and we get a defend from Action Dan with Jack 6 offsuit. This kind of gives you an idea of how loose he's playing. He check folds on the deuce deuce 7 flop. In this next hand, we get a raise from early position, and I elect to make a 3 bet here with the ace queen offsuit. He decides to call the 3 bet, Action Dan living up to his name, and he checks it over to me on the 3-3-9 rainbow flop, and I put out a small C bet, and he quickly makes the fold. This hand is actually pretty interesting. I raise it up with ace king offsuit here, under the gun. Under the gun +1 calls me, and when we flop an ace, we're going to continue betting here, definitely for value. When we get called, I think that his range is going to consist of some flush draws and worse aces. So when the queen comes on the turn, bricks off the flush draw, I decide to bet again because I think he's going to have a lot of ace 10s. He's going to have a lot of ace jacks, ace 9 suited and worse. So when we continue again and he makes the call, I'm pretty certain that we're going to have the best hand on this board. I think he would have raised ace queen on the turn because there is 2 diamonds, because there is 2 hearts. So I'm comfortable going to the river here, which is the deuce of clubs. Comfortable making a value bet on the river here. I think that he's going to have more worse aces than he is missed flush draws. So when I make the bet, a healthy bet here of $180 into a pot of 195, nearly a full pot bet, I wanted to make it look like I have a missed flush draw here, or I could have a missed flush draw. So I wanted to use this sizing with value and with bluffs. Obviously, I don't have a bluff here. I actually have value. So when he goes into the tank, I actually talk a little bit about this hand later on when I go in the booth. So I'll let my audio from that play. That was actually a really tough spot for him because I'm gonna have ace king or ace queen there so often, or I'm gonna have him beat. So when he thought about that, he decided that to make the fold, and I didn't give him a great price, so I actually don't hate his fold there. It's a tough spot for him for sure. This next hand is a bomb pot where I'm dealt in with 3 deuce offsuit, and we see a flop of queen 3-3. Obviously, everyone at the table sees the flop, so we're 8-way action here. I will go ahead and lead out into the field, and I bet $40 into a pot of 120, so a 1/3 pot bet. I expect to get action from all queens and definitely club flush draws here. When I get 2 calls, I'm not exactly sure what they have, obviously, because it's a bomb pot. And when the turn comes to 10 of clubs, a club flush is definitely a possibility, so I decide to check it over here and see what happens behind me. There's a very small bet by the guy on my left of $100. I have a feeling that he has a flush here, but I'm not going to fold for one bet because we can definitely make a full house on the river, and we still have trips, and there is a possibility that he's value betting queen 10 or ace queen or a hand like that. So I'm not going to give it up just yet. So I make the call, and when the jack comes on the river, check it over to him again, and he bets yet again. At this point, he's giving me a great price. He only bet $185 into a pot of 440, so about 40% of the pot. It's a great price, but at the same time, given the way that the action played in this hand, I think he's going to have a better 3 or a flush the majority of the time here. So despite getting a great price, I decide to let this one go. And he actually had a full house here, a flopped full house. He played this the best way that he could. It's just unfortunate for him that a club actually came on the turn. This next hand is fairly interesting. I open it up with the pocket 7s to my standard raise size of 15. Player on my left now 3-bets me to $50, taking a page out of my own book, but he gets a couple flats behind him, and so we obviously get a great price to peel pre-flop. So we make the call, and the flop comes king 10 deuce. Pretty much done with this hand. I check it over, and it checks all the way through. The turn is a king, and I don't think I can bet for value here because the only thing that I can get called by that's worse is a spade draw. So I decide to check it over, and it checks to a guy in position who now puts out a bet. And this is a spot where I can definitely fold, but I actually saw this guy make a large bet bluff earlier in a bomb pot when everyone showed weakness, and I thought that this was another spot where he would not be betting so large if he had a value hand. So I decide to take a stand with my pocket 7s here, and I make the min raise to put him all in because he only has like $80 left. And he ends up making the fold. So I was exactly right. He didn't have anything. He was just taking a stab at it. And it's lucky for me that I got to see a hand that he did that earlier. Otherwise, that would have been a much tougher raise for me. Another bomb pot here. I flop a flush draw, lead out into the field, and take it down when everyone folds. Raise it up with pocket 10s to my standard 15. Get a call from jack 10, 2 overs on the flop, check it back. Turn, he makes the nuts and leads into me. Easy fold for me with 3 overcards being out there. In this next hand, we get a raise to 15 from Ryan. I am on his right with jack 10 offsuit, and I decide to flat on the button here. I am playing pretty wide on the button, and we go heads up. The flop comes 9-5-4, all clubs. He checks it over to me, and I have a club and I have 2 overs, so I decide to start bluffing at this one. I think that I'm just trying to get him to fold out his ace highs here, his king highs, his queen highs, hands that we lose to. When the 6 comes on the turn, I'm going to continue betting here as a bluff, but when he calls again, I think that he has a hand that he is trapping with and doesn't want to fold. So when we don't improve on the river and the river basically brings in no draws with the deuce of hearts, I think that he has an actual value hand here, so I'm not going to try to get him to fold a top pair type hand or better. So I just give up on this one and check it back, and he does in fact have top pair. So I'm glad that I did not bet the river because he obviously was going to call this one. So save some money by aborting mission. This next hand starts with a call and a very small raise with ace king. A couple calls, and I decide to 3-bet this one as a bluff, just going after the dead money. But when the original raiser, now limp, re-raises me with ace king suited here, I have an easy fold. So just dump it in the muck. This is the great thing about having a table that's not going to fight back against you. I can comfortably make 3-bets with polarized type hands and expect them not to fight back unless they actually have a hand, commonly referred to as fit or fold poker, meaning they're either going to throw a fit or they're going to fold their hand. This next hand is a straddle pot, and I raise it up with the ace king suited. I get the straddler to defend with 9-7 suited. He does not have very much money. He only has $200 and he makes the call. I end up just checking this one down and rivering an ace, value betting the river, and he makes the fold. So pretty uneventful hand here. Next hand, I defend the big blind with pocket fives. It's a great flop for us. If he continues, I'm going to call one, but he checks it back. And the turn comes an ace. I check it over to him and he bets it. And fives is definitely not a hand that we want to be defending here on this board texture. So the better play is definitely to let it go here in the long run. Despite seeing that he actually had king nine, this is still the correct fold. All right, so we have ace eight suited and we're facing a raise and 2 calls in front of us on the button. Decide to flat. Flop comes great for us with ace, 9-7, and 2 hearts. So we flop top pair and the nut flush draw. When it checks to me, I'm going to bet for value here, and I go ahead and put out a bet. And when the original raiser check calls me, warning bells definitely go off in my mind. I think that he's going to have some ace king, ace queen, ace jacks here as played. So when the king comes on the turn and he checks it over to me again, while I do have a ton of equity versus those hands, I think that there's more value in actually checking here and trying to actually make my hand because I think that I'm behind the majority of the time. So there's no point in inflating a pot when I'm pretty sure I know exactly where I'm at. So I actually make a hand on the river and make 2 pair. So after he checks it over to me, I can comfortably go for value here. I decided to bet 140 into 185. And he definitely can't resist himself with ace jack here. Makes the call, and we take down another nice pot. Little uneventful, raise it up with king jack offsuit to $15, get called by queen 10. Flop is super dry, make a small c bet, take it down. This next hand is actually super interesting as well. I actually talked through this hand in the booth. This was an unknown player to me, and he raised it up in the hijack, and I decided to flat on the button with 7-8 suited. Flop, middle pair, and a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. He continues. We call, straightforward call here for sure. When the turn comes and it gives us a straight and a flush draw and a pair, and he continues again, it's definitely not a spot where we're going to be folding. I went in the booth and discussed this hand with Casey, so I'm going to let the game day analysis play in this one. And then the river bricked off, paired the bottom card, paired the board. So unfortunately, this gives him an opportunity to value bet really wide here because now he can value bet all top pairs. Now he can value bet over pairs and not worry about, 2 pairs because the bottom card pairing. So because he had such a wide value betting range. Seat one? Yeah, this guy in seat 1. Mm-hmm. He seemed a little bit nervous when he made his river bet, which gave me a little bit of pause. I thought about it for a while because
I remember this hand.
He did seem pretty nervous. But I was sitting there with second pair against an unknown who went 3 streets.
I thought it was third pair.
I was back and forth on it, but I decided to let it go. And he actually was bluffing with.
Yeah.
He had a king jack offsuit, so he had a jack in his hand. Kudos to him. He got me to fold it.
Right. Yeah. I was wondering because he did raise pre, and then he raised every single street.
Yeah, he bet every single street.
Bet every single street, and you really did take quite a bit of time on the river there to make that fold. And so I was wondering what it was that you were noticing that was causing you to pause so long, because a lot of players with just an 8 there, they're like, okay, it's not even worth it. It's a marginal spot anyway. Like, I'm just quickly folding.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is a great teachable moment. So when people bet 3 streets in a low stakes game, especially like a 1-3 game, in general, lower stakes players don't value bet very well on rivers. And as such, because they're not going to value bet very well on rivers, it's going to make their river bets more polarized, meaning that they're going to have like a nutted type hand or they're going to have bluffs. And because there's not going to be a lot of like ace 10s here from regular casual, because people are so happy to get to showdown. They're like, oh, I have ace 10 and there's like all these middle cards out here, top pair, top kicker, I check. That's going to happen so often. But really good players will value bet the ace 10. So when you're up against a really good player, it makes your job so tough on the river because they can have all of these value hands. But against a player that probably isn't going to value bet very wide, it makes hero calling a little bit easier because they're only going to have like jacks or better.
Right.
Or,
or a lot of bluffs in the range.
Bluffs, yeah. This next hand, there's a limp, and I decide to ISO that limp with 8-5 suited. Definitely a little bit wide here, of course. As you guys can see, I've definitely been opening it up. And when I get 3-bet on the button to a very small sizing, $70, only 50 more, and it folds back to me, I decided to make the call here because we are super deep. We have about 1,000 effective in front of us. So I decided to make the call even though I'm out of position. And when I flop a double gutter, I decided to check it over to him, and he continues, and I make the call. The turn comes a deuce of spades, giving me no additional equity, no pair, no backdoor flush draw. I still have my double gutter, of course. I check it over to him, and he continues again. And knowing that this guy is a pretty good player, I'm just not going to call here with a naked draw trying to get to 8 outs against a player of his type. And I'm not willing to check raise in this spot, so I decided to just quickly give it up and move on. This is actually the last hand for lawn car at the table. He opens it up under the gun, folds to me in the big blind. I 3-bet it with the kings, and he lets it go. Actually had a fun time playing with him. I could tell he was a good player. He bought in for the max, sat on my left. Every time I would win a pot, he would top up. So that was a surefire sign that he knew what he was doing. Cut off limps. I raise it up in the small blind with Jack-9 of hearts. We get a limp call from the cutoff, and flop comes Ace-Jack-King. I decide to put out a little value bet here. Just in case he has a naked spade, I wanted to deny some equity to his spades. So I bet small, and he folds. Raise it up, unopened to me with Jack-9 offsuit, get a defender from the big blind. He checks, I bet, having a range advantage, he calls. Turn, I'm not going to try to get him to fold top pair. I think his range is going to consist of a lot of top pairs. So I just check this one back. And when the river brings me a flush and he leads into me, I'm not going to fold for this small sizing. So I quickly make the call. He leads 20 into $62, so I'm definitely never folding a flush for that sizing. Next hand, raise it up to 15, my standard raise with aces. Get flatted by 10s, flop comes king 6-9, put out a value bet. 10s makes the discipline fold. Raise it up with the ace-5 of diamonds. Get a flat from the hijack, and then a 3-bet from the big blind. And while it is a $75 bet, he does have around 600 behind, and I think this is the squeeze spot for him. So I'm going to be defending my ace highs, especially my suited ace highs. And I call. So when the flop comes ace-7-6 rainbow and he checks it over to me, I'm going to check this one back because this is going to be a way ahead, way behind type situation. And when the king of diamonds comes on the turn and he checks it over to me again, I think that I'm definitely going to be ahead after he's checked twice here. He's going to have a lot of pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket 10s. So I'm going to go for value here and bet the turn. When he calls the turn, and there's now $268 in the pot, and the 8 of clubs comes on the river, he checks it over to me again. I'm going to go for value here because I know an ace is good all day here. I think he's going to have some king queens, some pocket jacks. So I decide to put a small bet targeting that range, $50, and he makes a very disciplined fold, letting go of second pair. This last hand I'm going to cover is actually a bomb pot again, where I'm dealt king, queen of clubs, and I flop a flush draw. I'm actually in the booth for this one, so I'm going to let the booth audio take over for this hand as well. You guys want to see some behind the scenes of vlogging?
Yeah, I do.
What's up? We're in the booth with Casey Mills. How's it going? Just doing some commentary for the Stones. We are talking about a bomb pot right now where I flop a flush draw.
You do. Second nut flush draw, actually. Not a lot working for anyone else.
Yeah, he leads out here, and I decide to raise with my draw here, mostly because he bet a sizing into, he bet $25 into a pot that was 150-ish. So I'm getting a really good price to bluff here. So I decided to make the semi-bluff, and when he makes the call, I actually think I'm behind here. I think he has some sort of one pair type hand, which I actually am behind versus ace high. And when he checks the turn, I basically full pot size shove here for his remaining stack of around $300, putting him to the test. I want to get him to fold all of his 9s in this spot. And if he doesn't fold his 9s here, it's fine. We can hit a club. We can hit a
king or a queen.
A king or a queen.
In this case, you couldn't hit the king, but
if he did have a 9,
right.
So I put him to the test here.
He lets it go.
And he lets it go.
Nicely done, Mr. Vibes. Well, first off, I didn't even know you were coming.
Yeah, I didn't know that I was coming either, honestly.
How did that happen?
I was in Reno this past weekend playing poker, and I had planned to stay for at least a couple days. I was taking a big shot. I was playing 10-25, 10-25-50 at times. And yeah, I wanted to take some shots, and it did not go well for me. So I didn't want to stick around Reno. So I hopped in the car and I just started driving. I drove to Lake Tahoe, dipped my feet in the water, just relaxed a little bit, and then I hopped on Hotel Tonight and found this really cool place in Rancho Murrieta on the way here. And then texted Justin and asked him what you guys were running today. He said we had a live stream. I was like, sure, why not? I'm driving through. I'll pop in. I actually really wanted to play in a lower stakes, like 1, 2, 3 type game, because a lot of the content that I create is obviously higher stakes, and a lot of the messages that I get are you talk about things that aren't applicable for my stakes, because I play 1-3 and you call these 3 bets and you're 3 betting and you're 4 betting and doing all these things, and I can't do that at my stakes. But I kind of wanted to play this game so that I can show that the things that I do are, they apply to all stakes. So look at these numbers right here. I have the highest aggression factor. I also have the lowest percentage of hands shown down. And I also have one of the higher VPIPs. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to play in this 1-3 game, is I wanted to prove to people that you can play loose, you can play aggressive, and you can not show down your hands and still win a lot of money. Like, I'm up almost $1,000 in this game.
Wow.
And
this 1-3 has not been wild. So
and it has
really
not been a wild game. It's been me collecting pots and me grinding pots with my high aggression and picking great spots. Mm-hmm. Like, actually, here's another hand. I'm in the small blind here, and I 3-bet this one from the small blind. There's not a lot of hands that I'm going to be flatting from the small blind in general when the button raises over the top of a limp, because their range is going to be so wide for raising the button. Obviously, he had queen deuce here, so that just proves that he's going to have a wide button range here.
So you just 3-bet and took it down. So Ipa wants to know where the next stop is on the road trip.
So I just got a message from someplace in Manteca. Is that how you pronounce it? It's like maybe 45 minutes south of Sacramento, some farming town that said that they have a 5-10 game tomorrow. And they DM'd me and said that it was a 1K buy-in and a 5K cap. So I looked at their Instagram, and it's a legit casino.
Okay.
And it's about an hour from here. So I'm going to drive there tomorrow and play some 5-10. We're going to put it on the vlog, so there's going to be some content around that too. And it's confirmed casino, so I'm not worried about getting jumped in some parking lot.
Let me ask you this. So do you play, I think I kind of know the answer, exploitative or GTO, a combination of the two? And at these lower stakes games, what kind of exploitative things are you seeing here that you're maybe not seeing when you're playing those bigger games? Yeah.
So in these, the short answer to that is that you really need to know your stuff when it comes to being optimal. So you need to know how often you need to call based on the size of the pot, what your equity is. Like, those are all game theory optimal things that you really should know. But when you're playing lower stakes games, people give away so much information, and that additional information is basically what leads to exploitative poker. Mm-hmm. All of these little factors that go into, well, this guy hasn't raised in an hour, or this guy changed his raise sizing, or this guy seems particularly nervous on this river. These kind of things let you deviate from optimal play to exploit players. You always need to be adjusting to the table. Like, there are games where I will open limp, and I will change my strategy, and I won't have such a high aggression factor, and I will be playing particularly passive, or I will be playing a little bit tighter. It just depends on the table. And at this particular table, I feel like I can get away with a little bit more than I normally can.
So when you start to get frustrated or feel tilted, I mean, I know last time you talked about your breathing and that sort of thing, but other players, like, do you have recommendations for them? Like, for those that you're coaching, do you ask them to tell them to get up and take a walk, to totally leave completely, or what's your advice?
Well, I think that taking a walk takes a lot of discipline, because how hard is it to get up from the table when you're stuck, and you know that if I can just get dealt in one more hand, I might pick up aces, or I might cold deck someone. So actually pulling yourself away from the table is very hard. So I can give you that recommendation. Yeah, take a walk, but that's easier said than done. Mm-hmm. Like, it's really hard to get up and walk away from the table. And that's coming from someone that's pretty zen. Right. You know?
Oh, they want to know how long you're planning on playing tonight.
I'm going to quit after the stream and head back to the hotel and start to put together the vlogs. The vlogs take a lot of work, you know. Yeah. And
do you get help with that, or you do it all yourself?
I do it all myself. So I'm gonna head back in.
Thank you so much. Always good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. See you next time.
That's what we are.
Poker room. Stream is over, and grabbing a pizza. We won almost $1,000. Oh man, that would hurt. What a crazy hand that. That would hurt though, for sure.